On the day of Aubrey's engagement, he deliberately hired a few thugs to trouble me. By the time I finished my statement at the police station and got home, it was already dark. When I got home, I overheard someone asking where I'd been. Aubrey chuckled and said, "I was worried she'd cause a scene, so I got a few people to make her go to the police station. By the time she gets back, everything will be settled." I stood outside, shaking my head with a bitter smile. I blocked all of Aubrey's contact details and turned around to board a flight abroad. That night, I heard that Aubrey couldn't find me, and despite his usual calm demeanor, he had a rare outburst. His eyes were bloodshot as he muttered, "She must be jealous," deliberately sulking. "Once she's calmed down, she'll come back, I'm sure of it." But he didn't know that I wasn't running off in a tantrum. I truly didn't want him anymore. By the time I finished at the police station, it was already dark. On the day of Aubrey's engagement, I panicked, and when I made a turn, I crashed my car. The other party was deliberately trying to cause trouble, and it dragged on until now. Aubrey's calls were still unreachable. His Facebook was full of photos with his fiancée. Each one was a painful reminder, and I was furious. The frustration and anger I'd been holding back all day needed an outlet, so I jumped in a cab and headed to his house. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. Aubrey sometimes invited friends over for drinks or to watch games. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I overheard them talking about me, I stopped. "Honestly, we all thought you'd end up with Michelle. She's your childhood friend, grew up with you, and she's beautiful, but she's got such a bad temper," Blair lamented. "She's been spoiled, causing trouble for years, and doesn't seem to get tired of it." Aubrey was slouched on the couch, glancing at his watch, his handsome face showing signs of frustration. It was about time she showed up. She'd probably come to him, crying and whining. He was already dreading it. "Strange though, you're engaged to Regina, and Michelle didn't flip out? We haven't seen her at all today." "Where is she?" Blair asked. Aubrey chuckled. "I was worried she'd make a scene, so I sent a few people to make sure she ended up at the police station. By the time she gets back, everything will be settled." "Great move, you're the only one who can handle Michelle," Dan praised. "But have you thought about this? You're engaged to Regina, and if Michelle's heart really is broken, what if she just walks away?" Blair asked. Aubrey's mind flashed with an image of my tear-streaked face, and his chest tightened. He snorted coldly and said indifferently, "I couldn't care less." Couldn't care less? 7 years of my life, and this is what I got in return. I withdrew my hand and turned to leave. It was early winter, and though the weather hadn't truly turned cold yet, I felt an internal chill that ran through me completely. After all these years of circling around Aubrey, fighting, arguing, the only one left by his side was me. I thought we'd go all the way. But he chose to get engaged to someone else and had me sent to the police station. How pathetic must I be for him to degrade me like this over and over again? The rain began to fall heavier, and my damp hair stuck to my forehead, my steps unsteady. I shook my head with a bitter smile. How did everything end up like this? Suddenly, all my previous hopes and pride felt so insignificant, like a joke. I tightened the collar of my half-wet coat, and one thought suddenly took root in my mind. I needed to go somewhere warm. Somewhere with no winter, no snow. And somewhere that wouldn't have Aubrey. I blocked all of Aubrey's contacts, including those of his friends. A strange number sent me a message. It was Regina, Aubrey's fiancée. "Aubrey's already engaged to me. You have no idea how much he loves me. You'd better stay out of it and save yourself some face. Aubrey used to be annoyed by you. Every time he saw you, he'd buy me a gift to make up for it. Anything you have, I have, anything you don't, I also have. Don't bother him again, or I'll tell everyone how you tried to steal my fiancé." Regina, the little assistant, always making mistakes. She was delicate and weak, and if you scolded her, her eyes would turn red, like a kitten. Did Aubrey know how arrogant she was? She had secretly sabotaged me many times. She once spilled wine on my couture dress and intentionally broke my diamond necklace. At the time, I thought she was a scheming bitch, but Aubrey felt sorry for her. When I spoke up, Aubrey would always step in to defend her. What a waste of my clothes and jewelry. I caused a scene, and Aubrey would dismiss it with a casual, "You have plenty of those things. She's just a young girl starting out in life. Don't make things difficult for Regina." Even if they were mine, if someone ruined them, they should pay for it. I entrusted the matter to my lawyer to demand compensation from Regina, item by item. Then, I pulled out the SIM card and threw it in the trash. Trash man, trash woman, I hope your lives are locked up forever. When my parents came upstairs and saw me packing my luggage, their faces were filled with worry. Are you sure you want to do this? Aubrey has gone too far. Should we go to his parents for an explanation? Our families had already accepted the relationship. Our backgrounds matched perfectly, and we had grown up together. There was no more ideal match than that. If you want to save face for me, don't go. I'm going abroad to help my brother manage the business. Didn't you always want me to gain some experience? My parents were shocked by what I said. After all, I used to be so caught up in love that I followed Aubrey everywhere since high school. Aren't you just upset? My mother asked cautiously. I hugged them tightly, my voice firm. I used to make you worry, but not anymore. My parents, just like my brother, had high hopes for me. I had been reckless and stubborn, wrongly treating Aubrey as my whole world. Okay, if you've made up your mind, go ahead. If you run into any problems, your dad will help you solve them. I agreed, my voice choked with emotion. I boarded the plane abroad, and everything in Sea City was now a chapter closed for me. That night, Aubrey waited. He waited for Michelle or for her call. He thought, if she called again, he'd pick up. Even if she cried and clung to him, he would bear it. But nothing came. It felt like a kite with its string cut, and a wave of anxiety hit his chest. I can't take it anymore, I'm going to bed, Dan said, his eyes barely open from exhaustion. They had been drinking all night, and as the night wore on, Aubrey seemed increasingly distracted. Regina called, gently asking how he was. Still awake? I miss you so much. I want to come see you. Aubrey, holding his glass, refused. My friends are with me, having a last single night party. You should go to sleep. Regina pouted, teasing him for a moment before reluctantly hanging up. Dan leaned over to Blair, whispering, "What's up with Aubrey?" First time I've heard of someone having a single party after getting engaged. Blair swirled his drink, letting out a long sigh. What single party? He's waiting for someone. Don't you see how obvious it is? Normally, Michelle would have barged in by now if she was in one of her moods. The fact that she hadn't shown up meant something was off. Should I call Michelle and ask where she is? Blair offered. Aubrey got up and walked to the window without refusing. Do whatever you want. Blair called the police station first, saying that Michelle had left before it got dark. Michelle's phone was also unreachable. Aubrey tried calling, only to find that he, Blair, and Dan had all been blocked. Looks like Michelle is really angry this time, Dan said. Michelle's not the type to just take things lying down. Do you think she's playing around? You had some thugs bother her, and now you're even engaged to someone else. That's going too far, Blair finally said what had been on his mind all evening. They also tried reaching out to Michelle's friends, but there was still no news. Aubrey, usually so calm, snapped. He kicked over the coffee table, smashing a bottle of wine, and glass shards flew everywhere. He had never imagined Michelle would leave. She had always been like a little tail, following him around, clinging to him. They had been together for so many years, and their families had long since accepted it. As for Regina, the more she pushed, the more he wanted to protect her. He protected her to the point where he couldn't even tell what kind of feelings he had left. His eyes bloodshot, he mumbled to himself, "She's definitely jealous, just trying to make me mad. Once she calms down, she'll come back. I'm sure of it." In the past, before Regina, Michelle had fought with him too. But all he had to do was endure it, calm her down, and she'd forgive him, becoming even nicer to him than before. But now, he didn't realize, Michelle wasn't running off to make him jealous, she really didn't want him anymore. After a long journey, I spent the whole night on a plane. When I landed, it wasn't my brother waiting for me at the airport, but his good friend Edric. I heard that he and my brother grew up together, and their bond was so tight they were like brothers. There were even rumors that their relationship was a bit ambiguous, that Edric secretly had feelings for my brother. So I kept my guard up, offering him a polite smile. Long time no see, Edric. He was tall and handsome, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, looking easygoing and relaxed. His bright smile was as warm as the local climate. My brother had to go out of town for business, so he sent me to pick you up. He took my suitcase from me and patted it. Shall we go? I'm not a kid anymore. Edric was 5 years older than me. He used to come over to our house a lot when we were kids, and he loved dragging me around by my suitcase. He whistled as he threw the luggage into the car and drove me to where I was staying. The weather here was warm and quite comfortable. His flashy red convertible blared music, and the wind outside the window swept away my exhaustion and the cold from back home. I really liked this place. My brother's house is being renovated right now, so you'll have to stay at mine for a few days. The room is ready, it's upstairs, second door on the right across from mine. The room was great, with a huge floor-to-ceiling window, but the decor was something else. Everything was pink. A clear example of a straight guy's taste. I was exhausted, so I quickly tidied up a little before lying down to catch up on sleep. In my dreams, I went back to the day I first met Aubrey in high school. He was leaning casually against the windowsill, wearing headphones and reading a book. The wind blew the trees outside, tousling his hair and the edge of his white shirt. It looked just like a scene from a movie. The girls were competing to see who would confess first. Without thinking, I walked up to him. Aubrey, I like you. He looked up at me, a mocking smile playing on his lips. Michelle, are you an idiot? I woke up instantly. I was embarrassed even in the dream. Back then, I was so brave. I remember that when I confessed, Aubrey just smiled sarcastically, but didn't say anything. Edric's voice came from outside the door. Michelle, are you an idiot? You've been sleeping for a whole day and night, even a pig couldn't sleep that much, get up and eat. The meal was cooked by Edric, and it was pretty impressive. He used to be famous for this. If he didn't like a dish at a restaurant, he'd open his own. He loved drumming, so he started a band. He liked stones, so he went into the mountains and had to be rescued by a helicopter. He dropped out of college halfway through to race cars. And there were many other rebellious things he did. Finally, his family couldn't stand it anymore and sent him abroad to learn a lesson. When they found out I was here, he moved his branch office here. At that time, my parents were really worried, afraid my brother would be influenced by him. But I actually admired him a little. Someone who lived like that surely didn't have regrets, right? Edric, what have you been up to these years? I asked, curiously. Business, he said without even lifting his eyelids. By the way, what did you come here for? To learn business from my brother. It felt like we were discussing something incredibly boring. He frowned, thought for a moment, and said seriously, since your brother's not around, you might as well learn from me for now. I began learning business from a former wild child. I started as a small assistant next to Edric, mostly making tea, running errands, and copying documents. It felt a little embarrassing with my fancy degree. A new girl had joined the secretarial office. She wore heavy makeup and had a very low-cut top. She snatched the coffee from my hands and went to deliver it to the CEO's office. Sir, your coffee. Edric didn't even look up. Before you spill my coffee, I should remind you that my suit and shoes together cost 230,000 yuan. They're hand-stitched and took 3 months to make. Are you sure you can afford to replace them? The girl silently took a step back, deliberately bending down to place the coffee on the desk. Edric pulled out a handkerchief to cover his nose and mouth. Are you spraying poison? It's giving me a headache. She ran out of the CEO's office, and her makeup was all ruined from crying. I stood outside, wanting to laugh, but holding it in, feeling helpless. With your stance, do you want me to transfer you to security? No. Then hurry up and come in. I wanted to call my brother and ask what kind of experiences Edric had gone through in these years, his mouth was so sharp. Edric sat with his legs crossed, his long fingers tapping rhythmically on the keyboard, his sharp eyes focused on the screen, and a slight smile tugging at his thin lips. Did you write this quarterly report? I was nervous, yes. It's pretty good, he nodded. I was overjoyed and quickly showered him with compliments. Thank you, I'll keep working hard. He glanced up at me. It's like a diary. Rewrite it, I want to see it before you leave today. My heart nearly shattered. But backing down was never my style. It's just a report, no one's going to die from it. So, I worked on it until 10 p.m. Still not done? You've got me so hungry just reading your report, Edric complained from the side. I sat uneasily in his CEO office's leather chair. An hour later, the food he'd ordered arrived. Eat first and then finish the report. You're not going to finish anytime soon, might as well take a break. I just wanted to gag him. He was so annoying. By the time I went back, it was already past midnight. I quickly washed up and collapsed into bed. Work had been draining all my time recently. I hadn't had a dream in a long time. Halfway through my sleep, I vaguely heard the phone ring. It was the lawyer I had hired before going abroad. Miss Michelle, Regina refuses to compensate. Mr. Aubrey has agreed to cover for her, but you must meet him in person. Now he wants to see me? I couldn't understand what he was up to. Do you think I need money? Tell them that if they don't compensate, I'll sue Regina for intentional damage to property. Let them think about it. After hanging up the phone, I couldn't shake off my sleepiness. I got up to grab a glass of water and noticed the lights were still on in the dining room. That gave me a fright. I was genuinely startled. It was Edric, sitting there working. Only people with a guilty conscience get scared. I rolled my eyes at him in my mind. I poured myself some water and walked over to him. Are you revising my quarterly report? Edric shook his head and said helplessly, it's for the shareholders. I'm worried they might think the company is going under and get heart attacks from the shock. I almost wanted to rip him apart. But when you're under someone else's roof, you have to swallow your pride. Fine, I'll leave you to it. I'm going to bed. As I turned around, I lost my balance. I ended up sitting right on his lap. My lips brushed against his face. My upper body pressed against his chest. A man and a woman alone in a room, it was a bit ambiguous. And where I sat was just awkward, too. Too sudden. His gaze fell on my lips, and I could feel his chest rise and fall faster. I could even hear his heartbeat, along with the refreshing scent of his shaving lotion. Good thing the water didn't spill. I quickly found an excuse to stand up, but his hand was still resting on my waist. You can trip on flat ground? I'm impressed. He withdrew his hand, turned his head, and started tapping on the keyboard. Good night, I'll go sleep now, I said, hurrying up the stairs. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but it felt like someone's gaze was following me the entire way up. The next morning, Edric came downstairs with dark circles under his eyes to have breakfast. I was a bit surprised. Was the report really that hard for him? I lowered my head and ate my breakfast, trying not to laugh when I saw his state. Edric wore sunglasses to the office. In the break room, everyone was gossiping about me. What's up with Edric today? Maybe he just wanted a new look, I said, making up an excuse. Finally, it was the weekend. Edric said he'd take me out to see the sights and enjoy some good food. As soon as I got in his car, I saw a strange number from B Country calling on my phone. Besides my family and lawyer, no one else had my number. I picked up the call and heard Regina crying on the other end. Miss Michelle, I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm at my wit's end. I accidentally damaged your necklace and clothes before, and I apologize. Aubrey has agreed to compensate you. Couldn't you find it in your heart to forgive me? Why do you still want to sue me? You're making things so hard for Aubrey, just because he's not with you anymore? Don't you care about the years of friendship you shared with him? If that's the case, I'll just leave, and Aubrey won't be put in a difficult position anymore. I wanted to curse, this bitch must be addicted to acting. Edric looked over at me, surprised. I just smiled awkwardly and held it in. When he saw I hung up, he politely said, that voiceover for the audiobook was pretty good, especially the evil female character, she really sold it. Heh, yeah, I forced a smile. He thought for a moment but couldn't help himself. How old are you? Still listening to these meaningless romance dramas? No wonder your report turned out like that. I had no energy to argue. Even Edric could tell her acting was top-notch, yet that idiot Aubrey believed everything she said. As for Regina, Aubrey had always protected her. Why was it different this time? Should I talk to him personally? Did he still expect me to go back and endure more torture? Edric took me to a famous high-mountain restaurant. We drove for 2 hours up winding mountain roads, with cliffs and steep slopes outside the window. The view when we got out of the car was breathtaking. The owner greeted us with a warm smile and gave Edric a big hug. When he tried to hug me too, Edric blocked him. When you're eating in a place like this, it doesn't matter what you eat, the scenery alone fills you up. You're the first girl he's brought here, the owner whispered as he served us. I stared, surprised. He didn't actually have feelings for my brother, did he? I looked quite like my brother. Every couple that comes to our restaurant can post a photo together on the wall. It's the sacred tree of the mountain. Anyone blessed by it will be together forever. Edric smiled at me. Before I could dodge, he stretched his long arm around me and pulled me into an intimate pose. And just like that, our affectionate photo was displayed in the restaurant, receiving the blessing of the sacred mountain. Seeing him grinning at the photo made me think about how I'd explain to Juan that such a relationship was not advisable. Aubrey's sudden appearance caught me off guard. I was sitting in Edric's yellow sports car, heading home from work. He was standing by the big oak tree across the street. Tall and imposing, with a cold demeanor, in terms of looks, he was top-notch. When he saw me get out of the car, he actually trembled. But none of that mattered anymore. Before leaving for abroad, I had already decided to sever ties with the past. Just like the old Michelle, who had foolishly spent 7 years loving Aubrey, without any real return. It was already dark when Aubrey still hadn't left. I sat at the dining table, eating noodles, while sneaking glances out the window. Under the dim streetlights, his figure looked particularly lonely. Who's that guy? Edric, dressed in light cotton loungewear, holding a coffee cup in one hand and his other hand in his pocket, stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window striking a pose. Aubrey, I said, afraid he'd do something rash and call the cops. He exaggerated, clearly having heard of him. So he's the idiot who's been brainwashed with sesame salt and turned into a useless fool. I was speechless. It was hard to imagine how my brother would describe me in front of him. Edric put down his cup and started walking toward the door. Where are you going? I don't like someone hanging around my doorstep, eyeing my woman. His sudden CEO-like declaration left me dumbfounded. Was he talking about me? He frowned at me and my noodles, displeased. Eat quickly, the noodles are getting soggy. I had no appetite for noodles anymore. I was afraid he'd go confront Aubrey and start a fight. Unexpectedly, he locked the door from the outside. I didn't dare look directly, so I pulled the curtain slightly to cover my face. I saw Edric walk up to Aubrey and talk to him for a while. Aubrey glanced over at me, his face filled with despair. Then he got in his car and left. What did you say to him? I was dying to know. Given what I knew about Aubrey, he wouldn't have given up so easily if he hadn't already humbled himself to see me. Edric smiled innocently as he walked upstairs. I just told him you're pregnant and need to rest. What? I grabbed a cushion from the sofa and threw it at him, hitting his slipper just right. This guy was so annoying. But, on the bright side, it saved me a huge problem. Edric had a meeting with a client in the evening. I had just left the office when I ran into Aubrey. You've been running around for so long. Are you done throwing a tantrum? He was like a shadow that just wouldn't leave, and I really wanted to slap him. Just admit it. You left so decisively, and I thought you were just throwing a fit to get back at me. But turns out you already found someone else. He stepped forward quickly, trying to grab my wrist, but I sidestepped and dodged. If you lay a hand on me, the security will send you straight to the police station. Aubrey seemed to realize something, his expression softening a bit, no longer as brash as before. Michelle, why are you making things difficult for Regina? Don't you know, the more you act like this, the more you're pushing me away? Still talking about Regina. At this point, I wished I could just push him back into her arms. You paid off her debt, fine. But now, you're the one making things hard for her. And by the way, you're already engaged, so stop thinking about all this nonsense. I turned to leave, but he followed me. You weren't like this before. You're still angry, right? I know I went too far that day, and I'm sorry. I almost laughed in frustration. Did he think this was just a game? Slap me, and then offer a sweet talk, such clumsy tactics, and yet, somehow, he had me stuck for 7 years. You should apologize to your fiancé, not me. She called me, saying you won't pay her debt. Poor girl. Aubrey stopped in his tracks, probably surprised that Regina, the sweet little thing, would contact me privately. I only did that to force you to see me. We used to be so close. I thought you'd always be by my side. I stopped and looked at him, feeling nothing but childish amusement. Aubrey, stop trying to play the heartbroken lover. You know full well what bothers me, and yet you keep pushing my limits. It makes you unhappy, and it makes me look petty. If you don't care, then fine, let's end it here. I can forget you, and I'm sure you'll forget me just as quickly. So, just leave me alone. Consider it a favor to me, preserve some dignity. Aubrey didn't follow. In a land where every season felt like spring, he felt trapped in an ice-cold sea, sinking helplessly. Her back gradually faded from view. Lately, he kept thinking back to the past. The high school and college years they spent together. Michelle at 17, her smile brighter than the sun. When she confessed her feelings to him, his heart skipped a beat. At some point, she started acting impulsive, getting jealous if he even spoke to other girls. He began to feel irritated, always opposing her. In the end, she was the one who always gave in first. If she had acted the same way as before, he wouldn't feel this hopeless now. Hearing her casually talk about forgetting him, he knew the person who had always followed him would never come back. My brother finally returned. We had only seen each other a few times in the past few years. I happily packed my things to go home with him. As we were leaving, Edric stood by the door, a lonely look in his eyes. In the car, my brother couldn't help but ask, "What's going on with you and Aubrey?" Not only did he go to our parents' house looking for you, but he even came to me. It's nothing. We just broke up. I smiled bitterly. I didn't mention that Aubrey had come looking for me. If my brother knew, he'd be even angrier. I heard he's been doing poorly lately. His family doesn't accept his fiancée, and that girl, who knows who put her up to it, foolishly went to the media, openly challenging his family. It was embarrassing for everyone. She's now publicly accepted, but in reality, she's under house arrest. She has no freedom at all. Her future won't be any easier. Aubrey probably saw Regina for who she truly was, but it was too late. As for Regina, it was her own choice. Aubrey's parents have tried several times to talk to ours, trying to reconcile things, but our parents rejected them, saying that we won't let our kids suffer any longer. He looked at me, concern in his eyes. I never understood why you liked Aubrey. Every time you came home crying, feeling wronged, Mom and Dad were heartbroken, yet you just couldn't let go. Hearing him say this, I wanted to slap myself. Don't worry, I won't make the same mistake again. My brother nodded with relief and ruffled my hair, just like when we were kids. So, what have you learned from Edric these days? He was testing me now. If I said serving tea, making copies, or enjoying company dinners, it would make me sound useless. Writing reports. He scoffed. That guy's reports are all things I taught him. I started to seriously worry, my brother, the mature and steady guy, couldn't possibly be gay, right? Now that I'm back, you should go back to the company. If you want to learn something, I'll teach you. Without thinking, I rejected him directly. Work should be done with a beginning and an end. I've learned a lot from Edric, and I just started. Let me stay a bit longer. His smile deepened, and he sighed, my bratty, willful little sister really has grown up. The next day, Edric moved in with my brother. Edric's house was attacked by wild boars and needs repairs, so he's staying here for now. Was it a coincidence or intentional? Edric's smile was almost too hard to hide. My brother was nearly 30 and still hadn't found a girlfriend. I couldn't let Edric steal the lead. Fine, let Edric stay in the room across from mine. I didn't believe 24-hour surveillance wouldn't stop him. Around the new year, the three of us returned to Be Country. Edric had specifically prepared an ankle-length down jacket for me, saying he wore that brand when he climbed Mount Everest. I hated the cold and hardly went out. My brother was busy visiting relatives with our parents, and Edric came to keep me company. He'd been pushed into blind dates lately. And of course, every single one scared the girls away the moment he opened his mouth. Edric, you're getting older. It's time to settle down, get married, have kids. What kind of girl do you like? Let me know if I come across someone suitable. He nodded, all the while hitting me in a video game. How could I keep playing like this? I threw the controller down and curled up on the couch, ignoring him. With your attitude, what girl would want you? I scolded, feeling he was too careless with women. Doesn't matter. I'm not interested in any of them, he said, his expression full of disdain. Hearing this, I jumped up in a flash. Under my strict supervision, he rarely had one-on-one interactions with my brother. He thought I was over him, but he was still scheming. You're not seriously interested in my brother, are you? Edric stared at me, his eyes wide enough to form 3 layers of eyelids. What interest would I have in your brother? I'm interested in you. Our gazes locked, time seemed to stop. It turned out I didn't need someone like Wan, I was the one. I felt awkward, and my heart skipped a beat. You don't feel anything at all, do you? He asked, his expression full of expectation. I thought for a moment. If I was honest, would he chase me around and scold me? Just as I was wondering how to answer, my phone rang. I picked it up without checking who it was. Michelle, Aubrey drank himself into a stomach ulcer and is in the hospital. Can you come see him? Blair's voice came through, and Edric heard it too. He's refusing treatment. Otherwise, you wouldn't be bothered. Wrong number. Call a doctor if you're sick. I hung up the phone. If I had known it was him, I wouldn't have answered. Edric probed, you're not coming? Mind your own business, I shot him a glare. He looked pleased, deliberately pretending to be disappointed. What a shame. Otherwise, you'd have experienced firsthand what it's like when an ex dies young, and the current one is better. Stop talking nonsense. I haven't agreed to anything with you yet. I rushed at him to hit him, but tripped over the trash can and fell straight into his arms. That made me think of the kiss from last time. The next day, he showed up at work with dark circles under his eyes. Could he have stayed up all night out of excitement? He held me tighter, more smug than ever. Your mouth didn't say anything, but your actions told me you're already deeply hooked. I want to cut off your tongue. And then, I was kissed by Edric with a deep, passionate kiss. By the time it ended, my legs were weak. We officially confirmed our relationship, and on holidays, both families sat down for dinner together. Edric, once known for his sharp tongue, now spoke nothing but sweet words, and he kept pouring them out, regardless of time or place. Once my parents found out his target wasn't my brother, but me, they made a complete 180-degree turn on their opinion of him. His parents were the most excited. They thought he would die alone, but instead, he found a great wife. I was showered with gifts, the only one unaffected was my brother, who gave Edric a scrutinizing look. I asked him, when did you know Edric had feelings for me? Remember the first time he came to our house? You were still in elementary school. He was such a beast. When we were little, my brother wouldn't play with me, but Edric would drag me around the house with his suitcase and even let me ride on his back. On your 18th birthday, he had a gift prepared for you, but you had a falling out with Aubrey and locked yourself in your room. He never got to give it to you. What gift? I asked, my heart racing. He took a team to a forest to find a stone. It was actually a meteorite, and he promised to give you a star. What I said as a joke, he took seriously, and almost risked his life for it. My heart was suddenly hit, stirring up waves of emotion. My brother patted my shoulder, smiling warmly, he's waited for you for many years. When he found out you were going abroad, he begged me to create opportunities for you too. What could I do? I could only tearfully accept the business he brought to my doorstep. As expected, the people around Edric were no saints. At midnight, as the old year passed and the new year began, the biggest and most beautiful fireworks in Haicheng were set off by Edric for me. The dazzling fireworks exploded in the sky, spelling out my name, followed by an arrow piercing a heart. I really couldn't compliment his taste. I thought it was over, but soon realized I had underestimated his imagination and creativity. As soon as the fireworks finished, thousands of drones rose into the sky. The drones formed different images, each representing a place Edric had been. There were mountains, deep seas, and Edric grinning widely, holding something in front of the camera. I knew it was a star. The star he had promised to give me on my 18th birthday. The drones rearranged themselves, and finally formed a message. I want to take you to see the stars and the sea. Michelle, my love. It was so awkward, but honestly, I was deeply touched. From the moment we became a couple to our wedding, it took less than a year. But Edric said he'd been waiting for over 10 years, and now all he dreamed about was how to marry me. On the day of the wedding, Aubrey's parents also came. Aubrey's mom took my hand and teared up. Everything that happened in the past was Aubrey's fault. I wish you all the best. Later, I found out Regina had run away from her surveillance, and in retaliation, sold the company's information to the competition. She was later imprisoned. Aubrey's company was severely weakened, and its momentum was no longer what it used to be. When Edric and I exchanged rings, I spotted someone in the crowd who looked just like Aubrey. He was wearing a white shirt, just like on the day I confessed to him. But things were different now. I hoped he understood that some things, once missed, are mistakes that last a lifetime. People change. No one stays in the same place, following behind forever. Edric held me at the waist and kissed me, then playfully nipped my lip as he pulled away. Focus, my love. I blushed. Lately, his teasing had been increasing. After the wedding, we headed straight for the airport. He was going to take me to see the stars and the sea, and the itinerary was already booked. Our parents were worried he might take me to some dangerous remote place, so they gathered together to research the trip for several days and only agreed after confirming it was safe. You pinch me, I feel like I'm dreaming. I leaned on his shoulder and softly kissed his cheek. Are you awake now? His gaze darkened as he kissed my lips, his large hand at the back of my neck deepening the kiss. Do you know what I regret the most? I was breathless from the kiss and shook my head. What hasn't he done, yet he'd still have regrets? He looked at me tenderly. I regret not confessing to you when you were 18. He sighed. If I had been braver then, there wouldn't have been any other issues. From now on, I'll make it up to you and compensate for the lost years. I smiled and nestled in his arms, feeling that happiness couldn't be any better. Life is vast, and who we meet or miss is part of the journey. What's left is true love. I've been working out lately. My energy and stamina are great, so don't worry, he whispered in my ear. I blushed. Who says he doesn't understand girls? Epilogue. I heard Michelle broke up with someone, so I gave myself half a day off to celebrate and think of a reason to go back to be country and win her back. I also heard she was coming, so I took the contract and went straight to negotiate with her brother. Her brother was a protective maniac. When he found out I had feelings for her, he mocked and ridiculed me for a long time. All the sarcasm I have today came from that time. I was defeated time and again, but kept getting back up, eventually making a breakthrough. Thankfully, he's a businessman and loves money. I've kept Michelle by my side, nurturing her like a lover. I thought it would be a slow burn romance, but she misunderstood and thought I liked her brother. How did we end up being connected like this? Did she want to see who would poison the other first? Later, I learned she wasn't the only one thinking like that. I need to speed up, set things right. My love for her will be visible to the whole world. She even called me vulgar. But that's okay, the more vulgar, the more elegant. No one will stand in the way of a burning heart, except for that fool Aubrey. But now, none of that matters. My star has finally come home. Our honeymoon lasted 3 months. I love her more every day. Love changes everything. Today, my brother-in-law urged me to make money quickly so I don't disappoint his sister. I know, material foundation determines everything. As a man with a family, I'll make the company bigger and stronger, and create new brilliance. My star, my love, we'll be together forever. Lastly, can she stop calling me Edric? A term of endearment like that, coming from her little mouth, is irresistible. So, I've increased my workout intensity. Life is really looking brighter every day. The end.